By the time Daniel realized his life had already happened, there was nothing left to change except his regret. He had spent decades waiting for the right moment, only to discover that the moment never arrives on its own. Daniel Harper was not a failure. That's important to understand. From the outside, his life looked fine. He had a steady job in logistics, a modest apartment in Ohio, a car that ran well enough, and a routine that rarely surprised him. He paid his bills on time, he stayed out of trouble. People described him as responsible and easygoing. Daniel liked that description. It felt safe. Every weekday morning, he woke up at 6:30 a.m., showered, brewed the same brand of coffee, and sat at the same spot at his small kitchen table. He scrolled through the news, then through social media, watching other people's lives unfold in real time. Friends from college posting vacation photos, a former coworker launching a business, an old girlfriend announcing her engagement. Daniel always reacted the same way. Good for them, he thought. My time will come. That sentence lived quietly in his mind, like a promise that didn't need to be examined. When coworkers asked why he hadn't applied for a promotion, he smiled and said, maybe next year. Things are a bit hectic right now. When his sister asked why he never moved out of state like he once talked about, he shrugged. I'm just waiting until things feel more stable. When friends teased him about dating apps, he laughed it off. I'll get serious about that later. Later. Tomorrow. Someday. Daniel believed patience was a virtue. What he didn't realize was that he had confused patience with avoidance. At night sometimes, he lay awake thinking about the life he imagined he would have by now. A different city, work that felt meaningful, someone to share quiet moments with, a version of himself who felt awake. But those thoughts were uncomfortable, so he pushed them aside. Tomorrow, he told himself, I'll deal with it tomorrow. Daniel had learned this habit early in life. Growing up, he was praised for being cautious. While other kids took risks, Daniel hesitated. His parents admired his good judgment. Teachers liked that he followed rules. He rarely failed, but he rarely stood out. In college, he studied business because it seemed practical, not because he loved it. When friends chased dreams that felt uncertain, Daniel chose stability. He watched people struggle, pivot, fail, and grow. He watched and waited. Waiting became his comfort zone. What Daniel never questioned was the quiet cost of waiting. Every year his goals stayed the same, just pushed forward a little. He didn't abandon his dreams, he postponed them so often that they lost their urgency. Psychologically, this felt smart, safe, responsible. But beneath the surface, something else was happening. Daniel wasn't afraid of failing, he was afraid of choosing. Because choosing meant closing other doors. Choosing meant responsibility. Choosing meant there would be no one else to blame. As long as he waited, his future remained perfect in theory. And so, he waited. The turning point came quietly, without drama. Daniel was 46 when he received the email. Subject line, retirement gathering, you're invited. It was for Mark, a man Daniel had started working with 20 years earlier. Mark was only 3 years older. Daniel stared at the screen longer than necessary. Retirement? That evening at the gathering, Daniel stood near the back of the room, holding a plastic cup of soda. Mark was laughing, surrounded by coworkers, talking about travel plans, hobbies, time with his grandkids. Someone clapped Daniel on the shoulder. Hard to believe, right? Makes you think. Daniel forced a smile. Yeah, time flies. But it didn't feel like time had flown. It felt like time had waited for him to show up and then moved on. Later that night, Daniel went home and sat in the dark without turning on the TV. That was unusual for him. He did something he hadn't done in years. He opened the folder on his old laptop labeled Ideas. Inside were half-written plans, notes about moving to another state, a business idea scribbled in vague bullet points, a document titled Things I'll Do When Things Settle Down. The dates on the files hit him harder than anything else. 10 years old, 15 years old, some older. Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. Not panic, but clarity. This wasn't a temporary phase. This wasn't a rough patch. This was his life. And the scariest realization followed. Nothing was stopping him now. Nothing ever had. A week later, Daniel took a day off work and drove to a nearby lake. He sat on a bench watching the water ripple in the wind. He thought about all the versions of himself that never happened. The Daniel who moved west. The Daniel who took a risk. The Daniel who asked someone to stay instead of assuming they would leave. He remembered an old girlfriend, Emily, who once told him, "I need to know you're choosing me, not just waiting to see what happens." At the time, he hadn't known how to respond. Now, decades later, he understood exactly what she meant. Waiting had cost him more than failure ever could. That day, Daniel made a decision. Not a dramatic one, not a cinematic one, just a real one. He decided to stop waiting. Stopping the habit of waiting didn't magically fix his life. In fact, at first, it made everything harder. Daniel applied for a leadership role at work and didn't get it. He joined the writing group, felt awkward and out of place. He tried dating again and faced rejection. Every setback felt sharper than he expected. Because when you stop waiting, you lose the comfort of excuses. There was no someday to hide behind anymore. Some nights, Daniel wondered if it was too late, if he had missed a window, if his best chance had quietly expired while he was being careful. But something else changed too. For the first time, his days felt real. When he failed, it hurt, but it was honest pain. When he succeeded, even slightly, it felt earned. He noticed details he used to ignore. Conversations felt deeper. Time felt heavier, but more valuable. Daniel wasn't suddenly happy, but he was awake, and that mattered more than comfort. The biggest consequence came when Daniel visited his father, who was now in his late 70s. They sat on the porch, watching the evening sky fade. Out of nowhere, his father said, "You know, I always thought I had more time." Daniel looked at him. "For what?" "For everything," his father replied. "I kept thinking I'd slow down later, enjoy things later, fix relationships later." He paused. Later never showed up. The words stayed with Daniel long after he drove home. He realized something painful but freeing. Regret doesn't come from doing the wrong thing. It comes from doing nothing for too long. Daniel couldn't change his past, but he could change how much future regret he carried forward. Daniel's life didn't transform into a success story you'd see in headlines. He didn't become famous. He didn't reinvent himself overnight. But he learned the most important psychological truth of his life. Waiting feels safe, but it quietly steals your future. Every time we delay a decision, we're still choosing. We're choosing comfort over growth, certainty over possibility, now over meaning. Tomorrow is not guaranteed, and even when it arrives, it looks suspiciously like today. Daniel learned that clarity doesn't come from waiting, confidence doesn't come from thinking, and fulfillment doesn't come from planning alone. They come from movement, from choosing, even imperfectly, from showing up before you feel ready. Daniel still wakes up early. He still drinks his coffee at the same table. But now when he thinks about tomorrow, it's not a hiding place. It's a direction. So here's the question he wishes someone had asked him years ago. What part of your life are you postponing while quietly assuming you'll have time later? And if tomorrow keeps looking exactly like today, how long are you willing to wait?